Okay, I think it's close enough. It's 4:05 here in San Antonio, Texas, and I just want to thank everybody for joining this afternoon here. Or good morning to you, good afternoon, wherever you may be. Welcome to the AFCAMP Utilities webinar. My name is Jesse Barrera. I'm the Utilities AFAMP Manager here at AFCEC. Within the chat box, I'm actually identified under Major Christopher Meeker, the first one, and then the real Lieutenant Colonel Meeker is Major Christopher Meeker, number 2 on the chat box. This webinar is the last of the Take 10 webinars that we've been hosting that really focuses on the new AFCAMP risk versus cost model. This webinar will be recorded as well as the other webinars, and they're being posted on YouTube. If you simply search under AFCEC webinars, you should be able to bring those YouTube videos up fairly easily. And you can refer to them for any additional general guidance on the 15-16 business rules. If you need some more guidance on the cost-saving calculations or programming, on how to program the projects, you'll find those in the webinars. And also the other AMP scoring methods are also captured within their respective webinars. Some quick rules of engagement. First, there is no dial-in, so all audio will be through the DCO, and everybody seems to be able to hear me loud and clear. They seem to enjoy the music, so that's all working out. Post any questions in the chat box, as Zach has stated. We'll try to answer them at the end of the DCO. This is a short agenda this afternoon, then really the concentration is on running through a utility condition calculation, looking at those worksheets and seeing how you would go about populating them and identifying the attributes and scoring those, and really arriving at a probability of failure. I also want to begin by first covering some myth busting, and we'll get to that in the next slide. And then once again, give you that opportunity at the end to ask any questions. I know this morning we had quite a few come in, so hopefully between the collection of this morning's and this afternoon's, we'll be able to answer a lot of those things that are on your minds. All right, let's get into some of the myth busting. This is pretty typical of these webinars, kind of people bringing up things that they've heard. Some of the myths they've heard. I just want to clear up 4 or so that I've come up with. One is pretty typical. You may have heard that AFCEC wants you to inventory your entire base within the next 3 months. And simply that's not true of any AMPs, much less the utilities AMP. We want you to focus on your most critical failing infrastructure systems first, and you know best which assets need immediate attention and which assets really need the capital investments sooner than later. And we just simply advise you to approach those first, approach those critical ones. Begin your condition assessments there. The second myth is that there is no utilities SMS, so we can't provide a condition index. Well, part of that is not a myth. I mean, there is truth in that there is currently no utilities SMS, but there is one on the horizon. We are working here at AFCEC, San Antonio, and in AFCEC East, working on that, and hopefully we'll have that, in the very near future. And those attributes that we are asking you to identify in the current UCI algorithm, those will continue to be used in the forthcoming SMS database. And the next myth is that utilities algorithms don't cover your requirements, and or the data is just unobtainable. The truth is that we have not addressed every single system or situation out there. We wanted to make sure that we at least focus on what we thought were going to be critical, important, high emission impact, important assets first. So we covered a majority of them, or a majority of them will fall under the utility algorithms that we have provided. And we have already begun to work with some of the MAJCONs on the methodology to use when those unique situations occur, or where you are crossing different amps. So keep the emails and phone calls coming. We'll continue to work with you and try and develop a method for calculating your particular issue or your particular condition. But keep in mind, this is the way forward, and together we'll continue to improve on the model. We'll look at the data that we're getting and the feedback, and come June, July of this fiscal year, we'll be ready to publish an even more robust, more refined set of business rules. Now, the last myth is just that this is just too hard and our airmen won't get it. I understand this is kind of new. It's a little different than the last models, but it's it's a little uneasy, but it's not incredibly difficult. If you just use good judgment and gather some basic information on your systems and plug it into a simple formula, you should be able to generate a condition index. And again, if you're struggling with that, we are here to help. So we're going to keep those lines of communication open. I ask that you contact us whenever these situations occur and you begin that struggle, and we'll try and get you through it. I just want to take a moment to kind of step back and talk about this new framework on this new model. And this is not something that should be entirely new. Within the utility AMP DCOs, I began introducing this model, this framework, in July, and we've re-emphasized it during the months leading up to now. And for those that you don't really know the model too well, it's really based on a risk versus savings framework. And from this point forward, all SRM projects will compete on a single IPL. And the risk principle is a function of two components: the probability of failure, which is keyed on the condition of that asset, and secondly, the consequence of failure. And the consequence of failure looks at how critical and what type of priority to the mission and the MAJCOM that requirement serves. And the third final component in this risk model is the savings component. And in this 15-16 IPL, the savings will account for 10 out of the 210 total points that would be available. So we're really using that almost as a tiebreaker. It's really going to be heavy on your probability of failure and your cost and your consequence of failure scores. And here's a sample of what your CAMP model might look like. And probably the most critical ones are and the ones with the highest priority are going to be up there in the right-hand corner. And here's some projected scoring for these sample projects. We're going to start getting into the worksheets themselves, and then really kind of dive into the utility worksheets and do a demonstration and work through a couple of them. The worksheets were built to provide some type of tool to help you calculate your project scores. And we think the calculations are fairly simple. They're pretty intuitive to us now that we've been using them here for about 6 weeks. But they do take some adjustment and some getting used to. And some of the sheets, especially the utility sheets, they're going to require some logic and in some cases some reprogramming of the cells depending on what particular asset or system and component you're going to score. The worksheet allows you to see the same scoring that we're going to see, or vice versa. We're going to see the same scoring that you see. At least that's the intent. We want to be as open as possible, full disclosure. We want to see that we're arriving at the same condition index that you are, and really determine where those variances are occurring. And this will all help us during the adjudication process. as we exchange information. So what's in these worksheets? Hopefully you've gone to the worksheets, but if you haven't, well, I'll go walk you through them here in a minute. The first tab is a simple cross-reference sheet, which shows your condition index tied to a probability of failure. And simply, once you calculate your condition index, you can go to this worksheet and do your cross-reference. We've also included a single worksheet to track your MAGCOM requirements. That'll help you better sort, your priorities and your determine really where your critical needs are. And of course, you have a tab for each of the various amps. And since each one really does their own calculation on the condition indexes a little differently. For instance, as you know, for facility systems, they use Builder, and for the TNAP amp, they're using primarily Paver to calculate their condition indexes. If you don't have this information, we've got it shared all over the place, and certainly if you go to this web page, that'll help you get to those documents. All right, so you're about ready to start your condition index scoring. Before you jump into the worksheet, there is some prep work you're going to have to do, either in my amp or any other amps. First, you're going to need to define your requirement. What is your project going to include? And once you've kind of narrowed that down, you're going to have to go out and do your assessment of the asset. For utility systems, if it's a linear infrastructure or distribution system, there's some attributes that we've identified that you're going to need to gather and score accordingly. You're also going to need to do a direct condition rating assessment of that particular asset. We provided definition ratings for scoring those DCRs, but really it's relying upon you to use your best engineering judgment to determine, what that direct condition rating is. So we're going to leave that DCR rating up to you for the most part. There are cases where your project scope may cross several amps, and you may, in that situation, want to give us a call to help walk you through it. You might have to do a weighted average of the condition indexes or some type of composite score, as well as look at the MDIs. So I'm sure some of those projects are going to cross several amps, and we'll work with you on really kind of honing in on a single condition index and a single POF. Again, once you have these condition indexes, you can cross-reference the worksheet for your POF score. And if you already know your MAGCOM priorities, you could actually continue and roll out the consequence of failure score as well. And the consequence of failure scoring is based on your MDI and your MAGCOM priority. So give me a second to switch over to the worksheets, and we'll walk through those. All right, hopefully you can see them. They're good on my screen. And as we go through this, I did pull 3 utility projects that I ran a query on yesterday to try and see if I can replicate your scoring. We'll get to those here in a minute. The first tab is that cross-reference sheet. Again, once you've calculated your condition index, you could come over here and simply, without having the worksheet do any calculations, determine what your probability of failure is. Likewise for the consequence of failure. So it's just a real quick cheat sheet to help you. The next worksheet is a MAGCOM IPL worksheet. And you can see here under the total score, the final calculation based on POF, your COF, and your cost savings. And this is just a sample that I've loaded in so that the final score would populate. That worksheet has generated a visual of the requirements of the projects. And the numbers here, 1, 2, 3, 5, and 9, those are the MatchCom priorities and that I just randomly assigned on the MatchCom IPL worksheet. The size of the bubbles should be relative to the cost savings ratio. If you do a quick comparison, they may or may not be finessed enough to really show one larger than the other at this time, but that's the intent of the sizing of the bubbles. And as you walk through the different tabs, you'll see the different utility amp calculation tabs. So here's utilities for water. I just want to point out that the utility tabs, they're not perfect. You got to really be sensitive to what algorithm you selected within the business rules, whether you selected algorithm 2A, 2B, or 2C, and you may need to adjust the formulas to accommodate that particular algorithm. In this case, the first couple of lines are based on the water line distribution algorithm. So you can simply plug in your scores and it'll calculate UCI. Utilities, wastewater, and the electrical and mechanical, these next three are actually scores that I pulled from ACES. Again, trying to replicate in my worksheet the same score that you received. So in this particular water distribution, they had identified within the remarks of ACES field an MDI of 70. So I loaded that in. They identified the sanitary sewer overflows and given it a score of 0. And simply plugging in the number 0. And so on for remaining life. They had a 2. The damage was rated as a 2. Infiltration was rated as a 2. And I had assigned a direct condition rating as a 2. So all that kicked out a utility condition index of 16. Since there were no other line items, really there is no weighted average. It's the same. So this wastewater distribution project is the number 1 item on the MatchCom IPL worksheet. So I'm going to switch back to that. And you can see the condition index of 16. It automatically generates a POF score of 100. The MDI was a 70. And the associated MDI score is a 42, which was automatically generated. I gave it a priority of 1, and so on. So at the end of the day, this particular one received a total score of 187. So on the risk matrix, you can certainly see number 1 up in the top right-hand corner. It would be a very competitive project. These are just 2 other demonstrations I did, again, to see if I could replicate. To be honest, on the third one, this mechanical one, some of the remarks were, the character strings were a little tough to walk through. I came close to replicating the same UCI, but within ACES PM, that particular project had a UCI score of 44, and I was able to come up with a score of 42. Either way, there certainly was a POF of 100 for that project. All right. So that was a quick walkthrough of how to work the utility worksheets. The biggest challenge there is just getting the data. And then going to the cross-reference tables in the business rules, utility sheets, and assigning a numeric value. And then from there you can use a worksheet to help you calculate the utility condition index of that particular line, component, a valve, or whatever you're going to be scoring. Just kind of want to reemphasize that we're here to help you get through this process. Any of those difficulties and challenges you're having to deal with, please give me a call and I'll help walk you through them, or consult with my colleagues on the best approach for handling them. And that's all I have in the way of presentations. I'm going to go ahead and open it up now for questions. So if you got any questions, throw them in the chat box. My colleague Zach there will state the question, and we'll try and answer the best we can. All right, Zach, I'm going to throw this back to you.
All right, can you all hear me? First question we have, how should we score our power plant? Is it a facility or utility? Assuming they may need
what's the question
on base.
Your power plant, is that what you said?
Yes, a power plant.
Okay. My first cross-reference is the CAT code. And no, I would venture to say if I went to the CAT code for a power plant, it falls under utilities. And if that is indeed correct, then you use the utility scoring algorithm to develop your condition index. There that we're going to have to work through on that particular situation, since there really is not to handle that particular situation. But I'm sure we can work through it, probably using some of the methodology that's being used in Builder.
All right, next question, and it was answered quickly in the chat box, but are housing utilities scored under this model and included in the Vamps? The short answer is no. We're focused on SRM 3400 appropriation at this time. However, we hope that a similar model process will be used to capture our housing requirements in the future. Any more to add to that, Jesse?
No, not really. If in fact it is in some way SRM, then certainly we would. But
Okay. Next question: is there a format template for Vamps? And again, I'll answer this one, Jesse. Vamps and BCamps, as you know them or have known them over the last couple of years, it's not the same anymore. We're not focused on making sure all our tabs are updated and all our issues are in there. We're focusing on hard data, whether that data is either in ACES PM or in your SMS or in both. That's where we want all that data to be, and we're going to pull it and use it accordingly. Next question is, we scored just the segment of the line scoped in the project, correct? Over to you, Jesse.
Yes, and that answer is yes. Now we did see a project recently where it was multiple segments. They all seem to be linear and in series, so you might be able to take a shortcut there when you bring it into the camp if they are linear and in series, and just arrive at one UCI condition index for that for that distribution system. But you know, if they are truly segmented and not in series, then yes, you probably need to do them individually.
Okay, next question. What criteria is used for UCI?
I'm not really sure specifically, you know, what they're trying to get at. The criteria we use for UCI is shown there in the business rules, utility condition index, and you got to determine what system it fits under, whether it's mechanical, electrical, wastewater, or water. And then B, there's 3 different formulas under each particular system, and trying to determine which one of those formulas is applicable. For a distribution type or linear system, it's generally the first formula within that worksheet, like 2A. And that takes into account a couple of attributes. One, it would be remaining service life, breaks if it's water, outages if it's power, you know, and it gathers fire flow for water. And, you know, depends on what system it is, but you look at that formula and you can identify what attributes we're looking for to populate that algorithm. There are certain components that, if it's a component and non-linear, then there's a couple options that are available to you within the business rules. There's a formula 2B and 2C, and the only variance between those two at the moment are that in 2B, we're able to identify a remaining service life, and we'll use that attribute along with a direct condition rating to arrive at an overall condition index. And the last one is we don't have any service life data available either through industry or other sources. So we're going to just ask that you do your own direct condition rating assessment and assign it a condition index, and then you go to the worksheets and do a cross-reference for the POF score. I'm not sure that really answered your question. We can follow up later if you need more details on how that process should go.
All right, next question is, do we go to the business rules document for instructions on changing algorithms and their definitions?
No. I mean, they're not subject to change for the FY15-16 AFCAMP. You know, certainly we're going to use the data we get and the feedback we get and to improve our model in the future and make any adjustments that, you know, that we feel are better. But for this time around, we've already made adjustments to those algorithms over the course of the last couple of months, you know, which is relatively fast, of course. But I think we got it down to a pretty simple formula. There were some pretty basic attributes to consider. So we're going to run with this and you know, really kind of see you know, how well it performs.
All right, next question. Says Vamps are independent of ACES PM, correct? So there is no SMS for utilities. So what is the format for the 1 April suspense with respect to utilities?
Within the business rules, we've asked you to, you know, I'm going to have to go back and you probably correct me, but ask them to load it into GeoBase. But really what we're after is that you do not stop at doing condition assessments just because you've done it for the camp. You know, continue to look at your utility systems and gather those and do some inventory on the next set of critical assets. And certainly we'll probably still be using some of those attributes, and if not, at least you'll have those attributes stored for you know, for your data gathering purposes, for data pool purposes in the future. So focus on the next set. We'll probably give you some refined guidance on where to stick that stuff, but right now we're asking you to load into a GeoBase type, your local GeoBase system. and we'll give you some more guidance when when some issues come with respect to that. But the key here is just don't stop at the camp. Just continue to consider your next one, because the next set of business rules will be rolling out in June and July.
All right, Jesse, that is all the questions so far. So if there are any more out there, let us know. We're taking all these down in Q&A. It's going to be posted on the CE portal along with all of our other documents. There was a question there from JVSA. That's where our slides are at, Integration Program Group site. But that's all the questions so far, Jesse. So over.
Fair enough. Thank you, Zach, and thank you everyone out there in the field. To us, it's a pretty simple process this time around. Pretty simple formula. Doing the pulls. I know y'all are struggling a little bit here and there. So, again, please give us a call, and we'll get through this together and develop even a better product next fiscal year. So, other than that, we're going to sign out, and you all have a wonderful day and a wonderful rest of the week, and a happy holiday. Thank you.